All right, guys, if you have been following the headlines, I mean, most of you guys have already seen this. Maybe you guys have experienced it. I don't know. But you've probably seen people, even on YouTube, saying that the game is dying. You've probably seen people posting the Steam charts on social media. You've also seen players arguing back and forth about whether this is actually a problem or if it's just normal for a game after launch. And I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys about it because I think a lot of people have been talking about it and it's making its rounds on social media like everything else. But it's about the player numbers. Yes, Arc Raiders has lost a massive percentage of its Steam player base compared to where it was earlier this year, and that's true. I mean, the numbers aren't being made up. The game had hundreds of thousands of concurrent players at its peak, and now those numbers are significantly lower. But here's the thing, guys, almost every multiplayer game out there loses players after launch. I mean, this is inevitable. It just happens. And I know that sounds obvious, but people seem to forget this every single time a new game comes out. I mean, when a game launches, everybody wants to try it, right? Streamers are playing it, content creators are making videos on it, every website, every social media is talking about it. I mean, your friends are telling you to buy it. There's that hype everywhere. And it's just normal. That's just what happens. And then a few months later down the road, guess what happens? People move on. Some people beat all the content they want to experience. Some people realize the game wasn't really for them. I mean, people go back to their favorite game, and some people just simply get bored, and that's normal. The real question isn't whether Arc Raiders lost players. The real question is why those players left. When we start digging into the community discussions on Reddit or X or even on YouTube, you start seeing a few common themes, and one of the biggest complaints is content, and a lot of players feel like they've already seen everything that the game has to offer. And think about it from the perspective of maybe someone who has hundreds of hours in the game. They know every map, they know every route, they know where the best loot spawns are, they know how every enemy behaves, and at some point that sense of discovery also disappears, and that's dangerous for any extraction shooter. And plus, if there's not really any end game, that is also something that gets boring really quick. I mean, the entire genre thrives on having constantly stuff to do and also the unpredictability element. And once that is gone, people just get tired of it. I mean, you want players constantly feeling they're entering a new extraction run or even adventure, because I feel like it is an adventure extraction. And when that feeling disappears, people do tend to start looking for something else. Another issue I've seen brought up is the pace of the updates. And to be fair to Embark, they have been updating the game and they haven't abandoned it, and the developers are still supporting Arc Raiders, but sometimes there's a huge difference between releasing these updates and releasing updates that fundamentally change the whole experience. I mean, players don't always want a new weapon, they don't always want a new enemy type. Sometimes they just want something that completely shakes up the game with a new map, new progression system, something that makes them feel like they're learning the game all over again. And I think that's where some of the frustration comes from, because when players feel like updates are too small or insignificant, they start feeling like they're running on a treadmill, basically. I mean, they're still moving, but they aren't really going anywhere. Now, another interesting point is that Arc Raiders attracted multiple different types of players at launch, right? And this is where things get really complicated, because some players came for PvE. They loved fighting the Ark, they loved scavenging, they loved the atmosphere, they loved cooperating even with random players. But other players came for the PvE element, and they want these intense encounters, the tension, they wanted betrayals, the ratting, they wanted the high stake firefights. And the problem is that those two groups, they don't always want the same game, and that's something that the community has been debating for months. I mean, since the game came out, you have some players saying that the game needs more PvP action. Then you have other players, which I think are the majority, say they want a PvE mode and more PvE action. Now, I'm not gonna lie, finding the balance between those two audiences is incredibly difficult. And what's funny is that you read these community discussions online all over, you'll find players leaving for completely opposite reasons. I mean, you got players saying there isn't enough PvP, another person says there's too much PvE, one player says the game is becoming too sweaty, another says it's too casual. I mean, this tells me that the issue really isn't something as simple as a single bad decision. It tells me that Arc Raiders is trying to serve multiple audiences at the same time, and that really is not an easy thing to balance. And here's where I think that whole conversation really gets interesting, because despite all the doom and gloom, despite all the headlines, despite all the dramatic YouTube thumbnails, comments, videos, Arc Raiders really is still a success, and it's a massive success, especially for an extraction shooter. I know some people won't like hearing that, but let's be honest, guys. Most games would kill to have the player numbers that Arc Raiders still has months after launch. Most studios would love to have that problem. I mean, imagine releasing a game that loses a huge percentage of players and still remains one of the most played games on Steam months later. I mean, that is not a failure in my opinion. I mean, that's a success mixed with some growing pains. And I think that's the distinction a lot of people miss. A game can lose players and still be healthy. I mean, those two things are not mutually exclusive. The gaming community has this kind of strange habit where a game is either the greatest thing ever made or it's completely dead. There's no middle ground, no nuance, no room for context. It's either winning or losing. And reality, it just doesn't work that way. Arc Raiders can have these declining numbers and still have a future. I mean, they can have unhappy players and still have a loyal community, and Arc Raiders can have problems and still be a great game. I mean, those things can all be true at the same time, and honestly, I think what happens over the next 6 months is going to determine a lot. I think the questions that we need to ask: can Embark continue delivering meaningful content? Can they keep players engaged? Can they address community concerns? Because that is ultimately what matters here. Launch hype only carries a game so far. Long-term success comes from keeping people interested after the whole honeymoon phase ends, and that's the real challenge. That's the challenge Arc Raiders is facing right now. Not survival, not avoiding a shutdown, not proving it was a success. The challenge is proving that players still have a reason to log in. Now, one thing I think people need to remember is that Arc Raiders isn't just competing against other extraction shooters. It's competing against every game in your library. I mean, there's a plethora of games out there that we can play, and I think that's something that gets overlooked whenever we talk about these player numbers and retention. When somebody stops playing Arc Raiders, it doesn't automatically mean that they hate the game. Sometimes it just means another game grabbed their attention. Maybe it's Call of Duty, Battlefield, Fortnite. Maybe they're grinding ranked in another game. Maybe they're playing a completely different genre. I mean, people really have so many options on hand right now. I mean, we're living in a time where there are hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands, maybe even, of games that are fighting for your attention. And because of that, keeping players engaged really is harder than it's ever been. Years ago, if you found a game that you liked, that might be the only game that you played for months. But today, players can jump between 5 different games in a single week, and that creates a massive challenge for developers because they're all really fighting for your attention and your retention. Because now it's not enough to simply make a good game. You have to make a game that people choose over everything else. That is a high bar to set. When I look at Arc Raiders, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles it's facing right now. Not because it's bad, not because it's broken, but because the gaming market is incredibly crowded. Let's talk about the extraction shooter genre for just a second, because I think this is another major factor. Extraction shooters are one of the toughest genres to sustain long term. I think about games like Escape from Tarkov, Hunt Showdown. Think about all the extraction games that have launched over the past few years. Most of them struggle with the exact same issues. I mean, the learning curve can be brutal for some of them, and new players get destroyed. Experienced players become extremely efficient, the skill gap grows, and eventually casual players start feeling left behind. This isn't unique to Arc Raiders. I mean, it's something almost every extraction shooter has to deal with. The longer a game exists, the more knowledge veteran players accumulate. I mean, that happens with most games actually. They know the maps, they know the loot route, they know the economy, they know every trick in the book. Meanwhile, a new player is just trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. And that is a huge difference. And if developers don't find ways to make the game experience welcoming for newcomers, the population can slowly become dominated by hardcore players. And that's when things start getting kind of murky here, because hardcore players are important, and if developers don't find ways to make the experience welcoming for newcomers, the population can slowly become dominated by hardcore players. And that is when things start getting a little bit dangerous, because hardcore players are important and they're the ones making guides, they're the ones creating content, they're the ones sticking around for years. But casual players are equally as important. I mean, they're often the majority of the player base, so we don't want to forget them. They're the people that are filling matchmaking. They're the people introducing friends to the game. They're the people buying into the community. And when casual players leave, you really have a huge problem on your hands. And I think that some of that concern is what we're seeing in discussions around or surrounding Arc Raiders. I mean, people aren't just worried about today's player numbers, they're worried about what those numbers might look like maybe 6 months from now. And that is a fair concern. I mean, here's where I think that people start getting a little too negative. Because we're being realistic, Arc Raiders still has something a lot of games wish they had. People care. That might sound strange, but it's true. I mean, the worst thing that can happen to a game isn't criticism. The worst thing that can happen is indifference. When nobody talks about your game, that's when you're in trouble. When nobody's making videos, nobody's discussing updates, when nobody's debating balance changes, that's when the game starts disappearing. And Arc Raiders, we're not there just yet, but I am starting to see a little less content, and that is a little concerning, I'm not gonna lie. But I think the challenge now is figuring out what Arc Raiders wants to be moving forward, because eventually every live service game reaches a crossroads. But the reality of live service development is that you can't make everybody happy. I mean, what you can do is make decisions that strengthen the long-term vision of the game, and I think that's what Embark needs to focus on. Personally, I think you don't have to chase every complaint and you don't have to react to every social media post, but I do think you have to listen to the majority of your base, because player retention is clearly something that the developers absolutely need to keep in mind. Otherwise, there's not going to be people playing your game, right? But for now though, I think that the reports of Arc Raiders' death are being kind of exaggerated. I mean, the game does have problems, game has some challenges, and it has work to do, but I will say it's very different from being dead. And if Embark plays its cards right, we really could be sitting here a year maybe from now having a completely different conversation. I mean, instead of asking why players left, we might be talking about how Arc Raiders became one of the biggest comeback stories. But I don't know, guys. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comment section below. Also, let me know, have you guys stopped playing Arc Raiders? Are you still grinding it every day? Do you think the player count concerns are overblown? Or do you think the game is heading in the wrong direction? But anyways, let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comment section below. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys hit the like button. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified every single time I upload a video. Now with that being said, this is GCP signing off.